Hello, I'm Jane Lowe, one of the behaviour advisors for the DFE Behaviour Advisor team. This module is about attendance and punctuality, and it's one in a series of modules that we publish from the Behaviour Hubs programme. The session's going to cover the following points. We're going to take some time to look at working together to improve school attendance, both the 2022 guidance and also the 2024 documents. And both documents you can see highlighted on this slide with the link to access both of them. Remembering that the 2024 document will not go live until August of this year. So we're currently following the 2022 guidance. That's where we are at right now, but also I will make reference to the document that will launch in August. We're then going to look at effective leadership and management of attendance, what makes up policy and practice, including all of the bullet points that you see there on the screen. By the end of the session, what I hope we're going to be able to take away with us is some notion of the expectations of schools, trusts, and local authorities in relation to attendance, how we can use data to support our work, the daily procedures that we put into operation to support attendance and promote it, but also tackle absence, how we can develop and implement a really effective attendance and punctuality policy, and how we work in partnership with some of those key partners, including parents, local authority, and other agencies. There is a whole wealth now of resources and guidance documents to support schools in their practice and policy in this area. And many of those resources are hosted on the DFE website and YouTube channel. So I would urge you to go and check some of those out. To kick us off and set the tone, the quote that you can see here is snatched straight from Creating a Culture by Tom Bennett, where Tom spoke of using cultural markers and levers to create really positive behaviour cultures in school. Tom talks about behaviour and attendance and punctuality as a crucial component of that culture when building a really positive framework to work within. It wouldn't be an attendance module if we didn't have a look at some stats. I want to play back some key headlines to you. And first of all, let's have a look at the post-pandemic picture. So between 2018 and 19 and 2021-22, overall absence increased by around 2.9 percentage points to 7.6%. Staggeringly, 850,000 children were persistently absent and 140,000 severely absent. Absent rates in that point in time were higher in secondary, special schools, and vulnerable children were more affected across all absence types. Those children eligible for free school meals were absent on average 21 days, rising to 25 days for those children with an EHCP. So some headlines there to certainly inform our work moving forward. This slide brings us a little bit more up to date. So let's have a look at these. And what these stats show, the latest stats, are several modest improvements that, again, we need to dig underneath and find out how we use that to inform our work moving forward. So attendance of pupils in state-funded schools for the year to date, so that was up to January, was 93.2% across all schools. Across state-funded school types, that was 94.7 in primary, 91.6 in secondary, and 87.3 in special. Across the autumn term, the persistent absence rate was 20.1%. That was a decrease from the autumn 22-23 census, where persistent absence was at 24.2%. So incremental gains. There's been some improvement in attendance and persistent absence from autumn 22-23 to autumn 23-24 across all phases, and also for key cohorts, including those that we highlighted on the first slide. So those children eligible for free school meals and those with SEN, we also saw some improvements. Daily data for 22-23 shows school absence of 7.5%, down from 8.6 in 21-22. So on average, that means children in England attending the equivalent around a day and a half more across an academic year than they did in the previous year. Food for thought here. You may well be familiar with this. It's a really useful document and really accessible, a quick read. So, listening to and learning from parents in the attendance crisis was a piece of research published by Dr. Sally Burtonshaw and Ed Dorrell in September 23. And what the research sought to do was to understand the views of parents and the lived experiences that lie beneath some of those attendance stats that we saw in the previous slide. What the report does recognise is that attendance has always been a symptom rather than a cause, a manifestation of really complex issues across the education system, but also beyond that as well. There's a link to the full report within this slide. It's not a huge read, very accessible, so I'd certainly urge you to go and have a look at that. This slide offers a summary of the headline findings, but again, I would urge you to go and read the full report. The headlines are extremely hard-hitting, including the views that term time holidays are now perceived to be socially acceptable and sanctions are seen as irrelevant and antagonistic. So some interesting headline findings there. I want to jump us forward though. You can have a refer back to this to pick out those headlines. And I do hate to spoil the end of a good read for you, but here are the recommendations. And I'm sure many of you are working on many of these or have practice in place that will facilitate some of this. Many of these, though, that you see in front of you are inextricably linked to number one, and number one is all important. So I'm going to start with that, and it's communication, communication around the data, listening to parents, equipping staff to do some of that listening too, and building those trusted and collaborative partnerships. Fines that feature throughout the report. The feedback was they've become mechanical, they're not wrapped in strong communications, there's no adherence to a particular strategy, and there's no meaningful context around it either. Nuanced support's a key feature, and making sure that we provide intensive, tailored support, which comes on the back of listening and really understanding what the barriers are and what the needs of families are. Support. You'll see that littered throughout the report. With COVID and cost of living crisis, that's brought about a significant shift in context for lots of different families that maybe we weren't working with before. Early help's flagged up as a mechanism to signpost and secure the right kind of support at the right time for families. Accuracy is an interesting one. Adding understanding here too. So educating parents on what does the attendance data mean. So explaining the codes and explaining expectations and breaking down some of that really complex presentation that we might do through percentages within reports, talking about days, sharing the data live and getting them familiar with it. Coding is key. And educating parents on the codes and ensuring consistent approaches in school. And we need to think that through in view of the new guidance landing in August 24, because we've got a new batch of codes to get used to. So it's going to be staff training, parental training, and getting away, putting mechanisms in place to make sure that that implementation is consistent and it's done in a very certain way. Finally, money. So SEND and CAMS and a lack of resource are seen as a significant factor in some of those barriers to attendance in school. Investment's essential, and it's not just for those two services. There's work for us all here. Schools do sterling work around support for SEND and also support for mental health. So let's think about how we work with those agencies, what those pathways might look like to support, and how we really understand those children with complex additional needs and also complex mental health needs to re-engage them and have them back in school. This will probably be a familiar, maybe not the diagram say familiar, but the language at the top certainly will be. But it maps out the working together to improve school attendance structure. So I'm going to just quickly dash through that for you to give us a bit of a recap. So first of all, setting those expectations is key, and they should be unashamedly high for all pupils and parents, and attendance has got to be prioritised above all else. Simply put, If we don't have the children in school, they won't be able to access the wonderful offer and provision that you have for them. So we have to put it first. Rigorous use of the attendance data to identify patterns of poor attendance and to track progress. That's got to be an important part of everyone's work, not just the attendance officer, not just the strategic lead, and working as soon as possible so that we can all work together to resolve those barriers as soon as we spot them and before they come entrenched across the school. When a pattern's spotted, staff should talk with the pupils and parents and then really listen and understand what those barriers are. It's worth thinking through who's the right person to have the conversation, where do we hold the conversation, who else should be involved, and just grabbing the pertinent partners around the table and creating a climate for a real frank conversation. It's important that schools focus on the skillful facilitation of support, which assumes that the pupil and family are active in the dialogue. They have to be at the centre of this. The barriers are their barriers, so they need to tell us so that we can better understand them and we can work out what help's needed and what we can offer to see that work. And also, when we've put that support in place, we need to listen to them again to find out what's working and what isn't working. Where absence persists and voluntary support isn't working or it's not being engaged with, we should then come back together again, explain the consequences clearly about what's going to happen if they can't access support and they can't engage, but equally to reframe that support. Is there a reason that they're not engaging with support? What are the barriers? Explore again. Agree a plan and a way forward, and then think about how we move on with that. Once we reach a point where all other avenues have been exhausted and support's not working or it's not been engaged with, we should be enforcing attendance through statutory intervention or prosecution to protect that pupil's right to education. So an overview of working together and its structure. What I'd like to do now is focus on leadership and management of attendance in school. And here are some essential components to incorporate as part of that. I'm going to talk about vision again, having a clear vision for attendance that's underpinned by those high expectations and core values. They've got to be communicated to everybody, all stakeholders, and they've got to be understood. They've got to be accessible and clear and simple. Staff have got to know, pupils have got to know, families have got to know. And that vision and clarity of expectations got to be incorporated into the design, build, and maintenance of school culture. It needs to be part of the fabric of every day, the rhythm of the school. Every single member of staff on the team should expect great attendance and punctuality from every member of the school community, and making sure that they make pupils aware, make sure that people understand the importance of being there every day and being there on time. Staff are going to need to share those expectations, adhering to the rules and routines on attendance, to do that follow-up, to pursue the child who's late or to mark the register in a particular way. Adhering to the procedures is key. You should be sharing the data, celebrating the progress that children make when they're here on time and they're here every day, and listening to those pupils and parents to understand the barriers better. Recognising attendance as a really important area of school improvement that is never done is also essential. As I said earlier on, it has to be a school improvement priority. If children are not there, they can't access what we've prepared for them. And it needs a relentless focus to meet those high expectations that we set. In order for it to work effectively, we've got to make sure it's resourced appropriately to create, build, and maintain those systems, and also to track performance. We need to make sure that attendance sits prominently in those strategic improvement plans and translate down then into faculty, department, and phase level plans. Everyone has to own it. The 2022 and 2024 guidance outlines the requirement to have a dedicated senior leader to champion and improve attendance across the school. That leader should have clearly assigned responsibilities, which are identified in the attendance policy, the escalation of procedures, and also the school improvement plan. They've got to be a member of SLT with the responsibility to shape the strategy, including having the authority to allocate resource, to direct staff, to hold people to account. That role is critical, However, we must also say that that attendance leader can't do the job alone, nor can the attendance officer, if you're blessed with an attendance officer in school. Staff need, at every single level, clear direction, roles and responsibilities on how they will promote attendance and how they will tackle absence. And that will involve every single member of the team. So the reception staff, the site manager who can offer that warm welcome and praise around punctuality when children land on time or land early. The canteen staff who get children ready for the day by serving up breakfast, and form tutors or class teachers who offer praise to those children who are making those improvements, the 100% attenders, and rally the children to compete for class of the week or form of the week to win the attendance prize. It should be factored into job descriptions and also critically staff development and training to ensure they can hold those, they can undertake those duties and live up to those responsibilities. Every single member of the team is going to need training to deliver your strategy. Everything from use of the school's MIS system to complete registers, understanding the daily procedures. What do I do if a child's late? Knowing how I lead on the daily and weekly rewards routines for attendance. Knowing how to monitor my data set. What questions do I need to ask myself? What questions do I need to ask the children? And what does that mean at faculty level or phase level? Absence can't be seen or referred to in isolation. Absence from school directly impacts upon attainment and well-being. And for the most vulnerable children, regular attendance is also a really important protective factor for them. And research has already shown the associations between regular absence from school and a number of extra familial harms. So safeguarding is key. And I'm going to lead into that. Put very, very simply, if staff can't see children, they cannot keep them safe. And all of your staff need to be alert to absence as a risk factor. They should understand the harms that children could be exposed to when they're not in school, as should parents for that matter. And staff should follow procedures to flag absence and punctuality issues and any safeguarding concerns to designated staff as soon as they spot them. Governors, really important, well, governors and trustees, they should really have an accurate view of school attendance. That's not just the headline figure. They should understand and be furnished with all of the data against key performance measures. So overall absence, unauthorised, authorised, PA, severely absent. They should also understand measures around intervention. So things like part-time timetables, fixed penalty notices, parenting contracts, education supervision orders. They need to understand that to know the kind of support that's available, along with an understanding of the pastoral structure and how it responds and your escalation of procedures. I'd like to move us on now, as promised, to talk about what a really good policy looks like and how that policy and procedures guide our work. So every school has an attendance policy or a set of procedures that they follow. And that policy should act as a user manual, if you like, for parents, for staff, and for pupils, almost a training tool for the staff. It should focus on practice. What are the routines? What's going to happen every single day of the week? And what will happen if attendance is great? And what will happen if attendance is not so good? Clear messages for everybody. You'll see in this slide, I've highlighted the we, our, us messages. And that's to really reiterate within a policy, the notion that it's about partnership. This is about working together. We need to work with parents to get the children in on time every day. And potentially we'll need to work with other partners to make that possible for some children with complex barriers. It holds consistent messages on expectations, clarity on routines, a promise of support and certainty of escalation where that's appropriate. So what I want to do is break down those three core components in more detail. So let's have a little hunt around, beginning with the expectations piece. So high expectations, I mentioned it earlier on, for every child are an absolute given, but it's still crucial to be clear about what that looks like and why it's important. I'm lucky enough to read literally hundreds of attendance policies for different schools up and down the land. There is some amazing practice. But often within a policy, this introductory section tends to be very, very wordy, points to all of the legality and government procedures and policy documents, which is relevant and maybe can sit somewhere else. This is our opportunity to grab parents and give clarity. We need to move away from that wordy, bulky section. We need to consider the audience and the reading ages for the policy as well. If we want parents and children to understand this, we need to make sure it's accessible. Many schools in this part of the policy often adopt the 100% notion. Every child should achieve 100% attendance, which I'm with you. I'm right behind that. Ambition is good and high expectations are great, but it's actually about much more than that. It's one thing for children to be present, but another to attend well and be prepared. We need to be talking about culture, getting there early, being on time, maybe getting themselves to breakfast club, what's happening in form time. So a real commitment and sign up to the culture. It's also really important in this section to focus on safe and healthy elements of attendance. So having children here means that they're safe, and some of those procedures you might have in place to follow up on safety. Provide real clarity, though, for pupils within the policy, and equally so for parents. They know what's going to happen every day and what the expectation is. So all staff, children and families, all of our stakeholders need to know and understand what the daily procedures are. How are things going to run around here? And they need to know that so that they can promote attendance and tackle absence when it happens and support our strategy. They need to think about how they contribute to this and also how they might be affected by those procedures as well. Every single element on this slide, each one of those bullets is underpinned by good communication. And without it, it's a non-starter. So communication is rooted in all of it and needs to be really high quality. Meet and greet is the first opportunity to welcome pupils into school and to really make them feel safe. And so it's really worth thinking about, what do children and parents, if we're talking for primary sector, see, hear and feel on arrival? Which areas of my school are open to the children on arrival? Do they have access to breakfast club? Is there a space where they can go and get ready for the day, smarten up their uniform, get comfortable, get tidy, get ready for the day? Register open and close times, that should be made really, really clear in the attendance policy. And first and foremost, accurate registers are essential. Don't underestimate the training needed to do that. I know I did in my first headship. I assumed everyone knew how to take a register and do that on time, well, without problem. Staff will need training to do this accurately and in a timely way, and will need to monitor it to make sure that that's happening. We should be proactively managing lateness and set that out in the attendance policy. Length of time the register will be open and at what point a child will be marked absent. And there's some real clarity around that in the guidance around the duration of that and what that looks like. And again, thinking about coding, how are children coded after the register's closed? Are staff on time? Are they ushering children in? Do children feel the pace? Crikey, we're nearly on time. Get yourselves in. Let's get the register on time. We don't want to be late. Have a wander around. Do your children value that form or registration time? And do they want to be there? Or is there children all over the corridors? Are children arriving late to form and late to start of the day? Are staff using that time to remind children of the expectations and their targets around attendance? And are they adjusting the attendance display to reflect what's happening in terms of performance? Are they talking to children about their attendance targets? And are they following up on some of that absence and lateness within their groups? We should be expecting parents to contact the school when their child's going to be absent to explain the reason and to put in place the processes to follow up with those parents if information is not provided. And we should have multiple emergency contacts so we can find out immediately what's happening and offer support if needed, or get out to the home and do a home visit if that's necessary too. Really robust first aid calling procedures are critical. And we need to enact those as soon as registers have closed and those internal checks have been undertaken to validate the lists. And it's worth considering that a conversation with a parent is far more powerful than an email or a text message. If we go back to working together, if this is all about listening and partnership, the email and the text message just simply won't cut that. We need to have a conversation. And the people who operate these procedures, they should have a direct connection back into the designated safeguarding lead to make sure that any follow-up around vulnerable children happens first. And that might include home visit procedures to check on welfare, to make sure that they're okay, and contact appropriate agencies if that's necessary too. On a daily basis, we should be liaising with some of those key partners, and that's going to include family support workers, social workers, youth offending support workers, the virtual school, and those children who are subject to multi-agency plans or assessments. And for children attending off-site provision or alternative provision, that daily contact should be made to capture the data around attendance and punctuality and follow up on it in the same way if things aren't as we expect them to be. On a daily basis, through the daily attendance dialogue, staff across the school will be delivering messages of praise and encouragement during form time, assemblies, at the gate, on the corridors, and they'll be updating those displays in classrooms, corridors, maybe in the reception space too. They might be getting ready the newsletter or sharing the attendance data with other stakeholders via social media, offering praise to parents or reminders and encouragements. And that promotion and celebration, that positive buzz about attendance is equally as important as all other elements here. This concept is a really, really useful one, which is why I want to share it with you. And it's a kind of takeaway, really, for you to go and take away and reflect on. Customer journeys are a really powerful exercise to undertake as a leader. A business manager gave me this concept or this notion many, many years ago. It's probably almost 20 years ago now. To look at my school, my service, in the eyes of a service user, or the parent of a service user, if you like. And to undertake that as a leader and to reflect on your school within their context as the customer or pupil is a really, really useful thing to do. And what I'd urge you to do is to take some time to think through the customer or pupil journey, as I've put it, from the walk from their house, maybe around the corner, approaching school, through the gate, into the school building, and give some thought to what your school does well and maybe what needs further work, and physically take that walk and put yourself into a role of maybe a child with mental health needs, maybe a young carer who's had to drop off 2 siblings prior to getting to school, a child in care, a child who's at risk within the community. Do the walk in their shoes and just think about what's working well here, and celebrate that, spread it around, grow that practice with others, but equally think about, okay, what might make the child more resistant, what potentially could be a barrier, and how am I going to address that? Really useful tool to use. So I will leave that one with you to take away and have a think about. As promised in the introduction, I'd like to talk about data, which I'm sure you are all expecting. And there should be a clear calendar of activity on how staff do attendance data and monitoring, which maps out what happens when and who does what, including how the data is used, how it's shared, and all importantly, how it's acted upon, and what the impact of that action is. Maintaining an ongoing daily dialogue around the data is key. It allows leaders and staff to respond swiftly if it's daily, and we can respond to some patterns as soon as we spot them. And we can do that maybe through a briefing to staff on punctuality headlines from the previous day, or even the morning session if we can get it out quick enough. And it could be having a daily check-in with a child who might need ongoing coaching to secure their first 100% attendance week. It could be a direct conversation with a faculty lead around absence within a particular group, subject, or lesson that took place the previous day. It could even be a call to a parent to applaud their work as their child has made it for 5 days that week for the first time ever. But that daily check of the data and daily response to data can be extremely powerful. Monitoring and analysing attendance data regularly, weekly, allows leaders to enact early intervention, so still quite regular, looking at it on a weekly basis, to address those issues as they emerge. And punctuality needs a real focus here too. Accruing the punctuality data or time missed is a really useful thing to share with parents, to share with students, to think about expectation and implication of not being there on time. And that includes raising concerns with other agencies too. You might be raising concerns with children's social care or early help services or others working with families around continued late arrival. Providing the appropriate level of data to individual staff is essential to ensure that they can access what they need easily. Equally, as I said earlier, staff will need to understand what they do with that data. Which bits have I got a lead on here? What do they delegate to others, if that's appropriate? And when do they act? And how do they record the actions that they've taken? Staff should be able to identify pupils within the data who need support. They should know how to spot patterns and what they might do to address them. They're going to need training to get there. The actions they take should align with the school's escalation of procedures, where maybe class teachers and tutors look after pupils at maybe 96 to 100% attendance, and phase or pastoral leads might take the lead with children with more significant absence issues. It will be different for whichever school you work in, or local authority might have input into that escalation too. It's going to be defined by your school's escalation of procedures and shaped by the staff structure that you have. What's important for everybody to do is to implement that escalation of procedures consistently and with certainty. So whilst there needs to be a live review of the data so we can take that swift action, and the impact of intervention can be monitored, there should also be periodic review across the academic year, including comparisons against previous terms and previous years. Comparing ourselves to ourselves over time is a really useful thing to do, and comparing the children against themselves over time is really useful. If there's a problem with year 11s now, what was happening in year 10? Where has that problem come from? And doing that forward look at, where are our year 9s now, or where are our year 2s now? What do we need to plan for? So over time, a useful thing to do. Schools should have systems that provide useful data at cohort, group, and individual pupil level to give a really accurate view of attendance. And that's going to include identifying reasons for absence, patterns amongst the full cohort, by year group, by key stage, by subject, and also faculty groups within secondary. Staff are also going to need to drill down into groups such as children who've got a social worker, those who are looked after, young carers, those eligible for free school meals or pupil premium, those with SEND, those with youth offending support too. There's real value in comparing the performance of any school with all schools, similar schools and those it's got a relationship with, for example, those in a trust or some kind of federation. There are times though, however, I want to give a health warning here, when the data needs to be treated with caution. For example, benchmark should not be used as a default position. If attendance has started to deteriorate in your school, or expectations that you have are not being realised, but the school sits above local or national figures, that's not okay, because you're comparing yourself over time. You can see a decline. We need to do something. Having the benchmark there, yeah, it's useful, but we're not performing as we should be, so we need to address it. This sounds really simple, but I want to say it because I think it's important. The data should drive the strategy, sounds super obvious, or the intervention for pupils and groups. The headline should give us the first indication or pattern. We then need to dig deeper to understand why it's happening. Can't make assumptions that that's the data, therefore we must do this. Let's get underneath it. That digging might include analysing data sets which sit beneath, observing practice, talking to staff, pupils and parents. Once you understand the data, you can then deploy the strategy or intervention to address the cause. Let's take an example. If the headline data for attendance or punctuality in year 2 within a school sits below other year groups, we'll need to identify which children stand out here. You're going to want to talk to year 2 class teachers. You might look at drop-off, meet and greet for year 2 at the gate and talk to parents. You might also explore where that particular group of children live who are struggling. You could also talk to those year 2 parents who do arrive late at school to explore barriers with them. When engaging in monitoring and analysis of the data, it's important to continually focus on the impact of your work. That's going to include the whole school strategy, escalation of procedures, rules and routines to support attendance, and targeted intervention around pupils and families. It's equally as important to look at what's the outcome for the child in terms of where is the data shifted around this child or this group of children. It is equally important to monitor and understand implementation. Was the escalation of procedures implemented? What type of support was put into place to bring about that difference? So monitor implementation and understand it, as well as monitoring the outcome and the impact. That will inform your future strategy and approach. So I explained, an important part of that policy is the escalation of procedures. And everyone should know what a child's attendance should be and how people are going to respond if it's not. And the escalation of procedures should give real clarity on those 4 elements. There should be a sequence, clear roles and responsibilities for everybody, tailored support, and then that formalisation of support and partnership working as we move through those procedures. Let me say something around clarity on sequence first, because again, schools have done some super work on this. There should be clarity on the sequence of procedures, and a visual representation of that really helps. The best attendance policies that I read have the escalation of procedures on a page, and it's a really nifty visual, often colour-coded to indicate the severity of absence or the severity of procedures, but it makes it super accessible for children, for staff, for parents. It aids display. I often see it displayed around the school, but equally it should map out some fundamental things. It should map out who does what, when, specific timings around that, and what the thresholds are. And it should be clear what happens if things get worse, but equally it should be clear what happens when things are going really well and they get better too. So aim for, a visual on a page, great way to do it. Let's have a look at roles and responsibilities. Roles of key staff should be clear so that pupils and parents know who they're going to be working with, and they know what those staff are responsible for. And also equally, so you can hold those staff accountable for carrying out those duties and responsibilities, and have this in the policy. Who are the key people we're going to be working with? I said earlier, and I'm going to say it again, everyone's got a contribution to make to support children to turn up every single day, to be on time and be prepared. It's everybody's job in the school to do that, through duty at the gates, caretaker, reception staff, do the welcome, telling them they look smart, they're ready for the day. Equally, all the staff should be scanning at the point of arrival. Are we doing all the welcome to all those kids who are coming in smiling, but can we spot those dragging their feet, looking sad, maybe looking a bit unkempt, and unlocking then those reasons and potential barriers. Gate duty really improves punctuality, knowing that someone's going to be there waiting and watching for me, but it also is an opportunity to unpack baggage and motivate children to get in. I see some super welcomes to school. It's so powerful to start the day right. And that culture in your school, which starts at the gate but permeates all the way through, it must make children feel safe, welcome and supported. And I'm also going to add to that, it must make parents feel that their children are safe. So if I'm a parent of a primary child, equally I could be dropping off a secondary child. I want to see people at the gate smiling at my children. I want to know that there's somebody at the gate that if I need to have a chat or I'm a bit worried about something, I can go and have a conversation. So make the children feel safe, but make parents feel that their children are safe too. During that welcome, those children need go-to adults that they can trust and can talk to about absence and barriers that they might be facing. The systems must promote the culture and support children to attend well. And don't forget to check that customer journey that I shared with you previously. Don't just do it once, do it on a regular cycle. There's got to be investment in preventative work with all children, and shifting the masses of children will have a significant impact on overall attendance. So continually sharing the message about the importance of attendance, reiterating routines, celebrating achievements and progress with attendance, we can capture a pretty captive audience there, and that is a large number of children who are attending well within your school. And if we can do the promotion piece with them, the chances of lifting our overall attendance are significant. There's a lot of power within that large group of children. And procedures to respond need to be enacted in the early stages. So as soon as we spot absence, we do it early, and we progress through those stages in this procedure, which are clear. They've got a clear monitoring period. We monitor during those phases. And as children move through the sequence, there's got to be a genuine intensification of support and not just a greater penalty. The new guidance takes a very different focus. It's about support that is tailored to the barriers and challenges that those children present with. So your escalation of procedures should demonstrate that, and it should be that genuine intensification of support. Implementation is absolutely everything, and that means every day, every duty, every lesson, every playtime. There'll be one day at the gate when there is a child looking for you or that person they know they can talk to because they need you. And there'll be children who really need that praise text because it is the first week when they've managed to be in 5 days. And everybody at home for that child has given 110% to make sure that that child has been there every day. So consistent and certain implementation is absolutely key. Let's move on to tailored support. And I mentioned earlier that strategy must be data-driven. Equally, support needs to be data-driven. So everyone's got to have that data, and regular analysis of that is critical. And that means staff, pupils, and parents having access to the data. So do your parents have an app to access the data live? What proportion of parents are signed up? Do they know how to use it? Use parents' evenings, get them in, get it on their phone, show them how to do it. Can students access their data on the MIS system, or are they reminded through form time or welcome, through commentary and displays in their classrooms or around the school? Does every layer of your pastoral support system or hierarchy have reports, and do they know how to analyse it? Let's not make assumptions. Let everyone know what it is that you're looking for. Is it days missed? Is it patterns? Is it sessions? Is it bits and blocks? What are we looking for? Share the trigger points and include the graphic to show them. Each piece of support will first involve that listening and understanding the barriers that I know I've said a lot about already. Within the policy, let pupils and parents know how staff are going to engage with them to explore the issues, and let them know that that's going to happen through dialogue and discussion with students. It might be a call home, it might be a meeting on site, it might be a meeting at their home. Explain what the meetings are about. A meeting shouldn't be seen as a punishment. It's an opportunity to explore the barriers and respond with support. Parents need to know that so they're not fearful of it. If they arrive fearful, you're likely not to get to the barrier or the challenge that they're facing. Within the escalation of procedures, identify those people. Let families know what their names are, what their roles are in school, and what expertise they've got too. Outline the connections back to the wider team. Key people like the SENCO, senior staff in school, mental health first aiders, they are key people that parents might just think, do you know what, we've got a barrier here, and I actually think it's the Senko that could help with this. So they're more open to engaging with key people in school. Explain how that team work with a wider set of partners and identify who some of those are. Maybe CAMS, youth offending, the police, social care, early help, virtual school. Every student who moves through the escalation procedures should have an individual plan which commits to support for the barriers and challenges that they've outlined. This does not have to be war and peace, but we do need something that identifies, okay, what are the challenges, what are the barriers, what's the data saying, and what do we agree in partnership, which outlines the commitments from the school, the parent, and the child. It's a partnership agreement about how we're going to move it forward. Establish really clear timelines and arrangements to monitor the impact of escalation and intervention. Within each stage, have a fixed monitoring period. And again, that's not a punishment. It's how do we find out if this is working or not. Have that monitoring period to implement the plan or intervention, test the impact, and map out, what happens if things go well. And if things are not improving, it's not quite right, let's come back again and what needs to happen next. You'll recognise this terminology, I am sure. It's taken from the research paper that Ofsted put together in 2022 post-pandemic. And what we've done with this slide is add some more detail to that framework that Ofsted suggested. So the listen, understand, empathise and support, but do not tolerate. And what I've done is added a series of useful questions around each of the strands that they've identified. And what it is there to do is to support reflection on your own school procedures, logistics, staff capability and capacity to support attendance. And that's a movable feast. If we just gone through a round of recruitment and we've got heaps of new staff, this thing moves around. That training's going to need to come to catch those staff up. We might have some experts in school where practice is great that we can use them to do some training of the new staff. We might have a complete switch around in the pastoral structure or a new pastoral structure introduced where some of these questions are pertinent. Do the staff know how to have the conversation? Do they know how to create a listening culture? How do we welcome families into school? Maybe go and do the customer journey again. What I've done here is added those questions. They are reflection points for you to go away and think about or have a look around school to see what's happening. We've also added several web links to additional resources to support some of that thinking. So again, it's a takeaway piece to have some time to think about and reflect on practice that you see in your own school. There's a shift in emphasis here as we move to formalising support. The focus is support, and previously, when I looked at attendance policies, school procedures, this section was often dominated by the word sanction. And there needs to be clarity on what the bottom line is if things are not improving. But again, this is expecting that it's still support. It's support to remove those barriers and challenges and to support to get those children into school to be there every day. And about how we remove those barriers and challenges. Details on formal support, again, should be accessible and easy to understand, including what is the bottom line if things don't improve. In this section, outline who you're going to be working with, explain the referral process if there is one. Things are not improving, so we're intensifying and formalising support, but support's the key word again. Reference the types of support and partnership working, and that might be parenting contracts, education supervision orders. Use guidance from your own local authority, from the DfE statutory guidance to inform what goes into this section. Be clear again about absence and safeguarding and the engagement of social care, and focus on absence as a safeguarding issue and that notion around not being able to access education, educational neglect. In this section, make your stance really clear on unauthorised leave. If you say in the policy that you will be issuing fixed penalty notices, then again, do it with certainty and consistency. Implementation's everything, as I said before. So partnerships. I've talked continuously about partnerships throughout the module, but let's say a little bit more. So to make the procedures around partnership working happen, well, they're fundamental to the strategy, first of all. We've talked about pupils and parents and working with them, but working with partners beyond families is also very, very important. You will already have established networks and relationships that you've built with partners. And networks should include those key partners that are listed here as a minimum. Sharing information and working collaboratively with other schools has huge benefits. And that's going to be particularly beneficial in supporting transition between feeders. And also local groups of schools often work together on attendance policy and procedure to make sure that they are aligned, knowing that they often share families across that group of schools. Designated staff within neighbouring schools also maintain regular contact to check up on siblings and work together around safeguarding concerns. I see some sterling work done by DSLs on this where they work collaboratively. Every school has got to work with its local community, including the voluntary and community sector, to remove barriers to attendance. And in some cases, families will experience the same or similar barriers to attendance for multiple children who attend different schools within that area. As such, again, it's a mutual benefit for those schools to come together and work together with agency partners to have a consistent and comprehensive approach. Local authorities and schools of all types are expected to meet regularly now. And to facilitate that timely collaborative working across partners, schools also have to legally share their information from registers with local authority. That allows the local authority to have an overview of what's happening within the locality and maybe within communities and clusters across large local authorities. And that helps inform their strategy and facilitate joint working and better targeted support within a given area. Where there are safeguarding concerns, intensify support through statutory children's social care and work with other schools in the local area, such as the schools that the child previously attended or where siblings are maybe going. And for those children with a social worker or family support worker, we need to keep them in the loop and keep them informed around absence and punctuality. And for looked after children or those subject to a multi-agency plan, we need to engage those social workers, have them on board, have them as a joint party as part of that attendance plan that we're constructing. And we should also feed directly into the PEP or into that multi-agency plan that sits around that child. Attendance should be a fundamental part of that multi-agency plan to ensure that that child's in school, they're safe from harms outside school, and we increase those protective factors by having them there. Some pupils face greater barriers to attendance than their peers, and we saw that in the data right at the beginning of this presentation. And that can include children who suffer from long-term medical conditions or those who have special educational needs and disabilities. Their right to an education is the same as any other pupil. Therefore, the attendance ambition for these pupils should be the same as any other two. And in order to do that effectively, we'll need to do some core things. And firstly, establishing great relationships with their parents so that they feel confident to talk if they need to. Parents know their children best and can often offer insights about life beyond school that helps unlock and explain challenges and really helps us shape our work. You might do the customer journey with a parent to unlock some of that. Really understand their needs, barriers, challenges, and vulnerabilities. And to do that effectively, we've got to speak with children and their families and review their context and attendance. It's much wider than just the data itself. And we should do that routinely through review of the HCP, multi-agency plan, or in more regular discussions to inform the assessment. We should be creating regular opportunities to listen to children and families with SEND and other vulnerabilities. And that can be factored into existing meetings and through more frequent check-ins, maybe at the gate, or a catch-up maybe at the end of the week, or feedback on performance. We should assign designated staff and key workers too, and these children should have allocated go-to people who should have sight of their attendance and punctuality, the data, what's happening, what are the patterns. They will also know the children very, very well and can ensure that that support that we offer is able to tackle the barriers that the child presents with. We should ensure that pastoral support's joined up, and any pastoral support around these groups should join up with key personnel and designated staff such as the DSL, the SENCO, the designated teacher for looked after children, and the attendance strategic lead, making sure that we talk together about the children to know the way forward. We should also make sure that the data is regularly monitored for these groups, including at board and governing body meetings, and in targeted support meetings with local authority, so that any additional support from other partners can be accessed when it's necessary. I'll do a plug for it again. Undertake the customer journey to review policy and practice for these particular children. Take the walk into school, run a scenario through your procedures. What would you need to be confident and certain of before sending your child to school with a severe medical condition? How would you feel about the escalation of procedures, knowing that your child had missed school due to illness? Play some of those scenarios back to think about your approach and to inform your approach. Once your policy and procedures have been crafted, so once you've cracked it, you've got it sorted, sharing it and implementing it consistently are essential. All that hard work, you absolutely want it out there. And the key to effective dissemination is, first of all, consistent messaging. So focus on the core elements: high expectations, safety, access, and align to the school values. Reiterate those over and over. And whilst we're on over communication is key. We can never communicate too much. Aim to establish an ongoing commentary with all stakeholders through websites, hard copies, texts, letters, postcards, and refer back to the policy at all times to reiterate, remind, and re-engage. When students first join the school, prioritise this message and make it really clear to them and also to parents. And when they are new to you, rehearse the daily routines for students during transition, arrival in the morning, how breakfast club runs, and at the beginning of each school term, revisit that to make sure they're clear. Accessibility is key, and I mentioned this in terms of reading age and accessible policy being clear, but also having a visual is really helpful. That process on a page I mentioned earlier, as it doesn't rely on percentages, complex stats on impact. Parents need to know fundamentally what will happen if my child attends well and what will happen if they don't. It should be displayed around the school, in every form or classroom, in assembly, in reception, everywhere. School newsletter, often reminders, sending that page out. Okay, implementation is complex and it's got implications for everybody. First thing I want to say again is implementation is everything. A policy and written procedure is one thing. A whole school policy and approach that is lived is entirely different. People need to see it working. Students need to know and see what the expectations are, how do I meet them, and what happens when I don't, and also what happens when I do. We need to train staff, remind staff, support staff, and repeat. Staff need to see it happening too. They need to know how to do it themselves, so train them. Offer them reminders about their responsibilities and support those who struggle to get it right. They'll need clear guidance on registers, running form times, staffing the gate, and how to forge relationships with pupils and parents. Monitor that implementation, check that it's happening, visit the gate, have a look around. Are they all smiling? Do they know how to screen children for baggage? Do they know how to talk to children? Visit form and registration or welcome time. Check the registers. Is that display changing in classrooms? Are all of the staff doing the rah-rah? Are they behind it? What corridors? Are children out of lesson? Are they late to lesson? Dip sample some of those attendance plans. What's the quality of those plans like? Are those plans working? What's the impact? If they're not working, what's changing? The feedback and performance commentary. We need to let everyone know how it's going. There's a lot of hard work that takes to do this, so we need to give people feedback. Share the data with staff, celebrate the highs, and identified what made the difference. What made us make the jump? Equally, work through the lows. Tighten up practice and plan for action where we spot dips. Give feedback on performance, do a form time walkthrough. How was it? Late duty, what did it feel like? How long was the queue? What kind of explanations were given? What support's being given as a result? Let's bring things together. So here's a summary of the key points raised through the presentation, all of which underpin strong attendance policy and practice. I'm going to leave it as a reference piece for you. I don't want to go through all of them in detail. We've covered all of those already. Finally, what I'd like to share are a number of reference points to access some of those materials signposted within the presentation. And don't forget to flick back to those slides to access the research piece, the new guidance, and some of those other resources within the Ofsted slide too. I hope it's been useful. I hope it guides your thinking around policy and practice on attendance. Thanks so much.